Hi, my name's Neil Graff. I'm a field service tech for Stewart Film Screen. Today we're going to go through all the steps required for removal and replacement of the roller tube assembly for a Stealth Trapdoor. The tools required are a Phillips screwdriver. You'll need two 5/32 Allen wrenches. I have the long ones, which are optional. You don't have to have them, but they make it much easier. And then I have two smaller ones that I'm only going to use to help hold things in place at one point, and these happen to be 1/8 inch so that they will fit inside a screw hole, and you'll see where those come in as we progress. So at this point, we'll assume that you know how to kill the power when the time comes. You're going to begin by operating the screen, allowing the door to open, and then you're going to raise the screen and stop the unit while the door is in open position, just like this. Now I have the stop control. Sometimes some systems will have stop, and some systems are either all the way up or all the way down. Whichever system you're operating, you want the screen to go all the way down before you stop it if it's just an up and down command. When you hit up, you want to put your finger on this door closed micro, and when the screen goes up, you already have the door closed micro depressed so that it will stop the function right there. Now the door is in the open position. You kill the power and you can let go and everything will stay. So now that you have the power off, the door's in the open position, the next thing to do is to remove this access panel right here. And that is attached with two Phillips screws, one there and one there. So you just loosen the screws and remove the access panel. Okay, with the access panel removed, you reach up inside and pull out your wire harness. And then you'll need to cut the cable ties so that you can separate out the motor cable from the rest of the wires. So with the wiring, there's several of the same color that go different places. You're going to want to take the time and label your wires and make sure that you know which wires go where, so that when you go back together there's no confusion. The ground wires are going to need to be cut as you take them apart, because the type of terminal that's used is a permanent fixed terminal. So you actually have to cut those and then wire nut them back when you go back together. The rest of them, you're going to want to label them so you know which are the motor wires and which are your power wires. So now we've got the wires labeled, unhooked, and I have the power coming in is unhooked. The rest of the wires will all come out together. They come off of the end plate and all the electronics there, so they'll come out along with the entire assembly unit. Now we're ready to remove the mounting screws. So it's a 5/32 Allen wrench, and I come in and break them loose and get them so that they're both able to turn freely. And I generally take the top one out first because it's the hardest one to get to. And once you have it loose enough to turn it by hand, it makes life much easier. But this is where having the optional longer Allen wrench comes in, because you can get to it. And you remove the screws and support the as you get ready to remove this last screw, you must support the end plate with one hand while you remove the last screw, because that's all that's holding it in. Once that screw comes out, the whole unit falls out. Now the unit's ready to come out. Now while I was over on the other side undoing the mounts on over there, in a perfect world my partner was on this side undoing these mounts, so both ends come apart at the same time, although for demo purposes I'm doing each side separate. Once again, I'm supporting the end plate as I remove the screw, and now the whole unit's ready to come out. So now we've got the end plate, we're ready to come out. So we lower it down, everything clears. Once you get it to this point, you can support it by the end of the tubes, back closed, and then bring it down to the floor. So you rotate it so the door is in the closed position, and then set the whole unit down on the floor on the door. So now we have the entire unit assembly sitting on the floor. The first thing we need to do is remove the screw under here that holds the sideline onto the roller tube assembly. So we remove this screw, and it can stay, the string will stay with it. And we just let that dangle for now. And then what we will wind up doing is pulling this roller tube off of the motor and leaving the motor intact, just where it is. So now we'll move from the motor end to the dead end. And now we're at what we call the dead end with the idler pin, and you have two mounting screws that hold this assembly in place. We're going to remove those, and we break those loose. And remove them. Once you start taking them out, you need to reach under and support the screen by the roller tube. Everything we do, we handle by the ends of the tube only. Do not touch the material itself. Everything is by the ends of the tube. Now that that's loose, we can slide the screen right off of the motor at the other end. All these parts can fall off. We'll put them back together later. Now we can take this tube and pull it straight off of the motor with a person at the other end holding the motor. Okay, so now I have my partner down at the other end, and we're just going to pull straight out and pull the screen right off of the motor. The motor stays intact where it is, and then we have the whole unit off, and we just lay it on the floor, and we're good to go. Ready to put. Okay, we're putting the new roller tube assembly with the screen back on. One thing that you wanted to watch out for as we go back is that you don't move the timing ring. That needs to stay in line with the drive wheel, and the timing ring, if it spins, will change the settings of your up and down limit. So leaving that where it was originally, we pick the screen up, once again handling it only by the ends of the tube. We slide it back on. And all the way back on. We're good there. And then we put the dead end back on together. That goes like that. That's pulled out. And now we're ready to reattach the sideline on the motor end. And now we're ready to reinstall this whole assembly back into the case. Before we try to reinsert this assembly back into the case, you need to be aware of how it actually goes. This is your end plate, and this end plate is a thin piece of sheet metal, and this goes inside a slot. That end plate will go on the inside of this plate here, and then this slot right here is the slot that the end plate goes inside of. So it needs to go just like the end of my Allen wrench, straight up into that slot. Once you get it in position, it's very difficult to just put the mounting screws in. I take the smaller Allen wrench that we spoke about when we talked about the list of tools, and once I get the end plate into position, I take that Allen wrench and just put it through the mounting hole on the end plate and through this mount, and that will hold it in place while I position the screws and get everything else locked in. Okay, before we can put the unit back in, we have the door still in the closed position. We need to rotate it back to the open position. So you swing it back around, and then we can fit it back in. So now with the unit back in position, I have the Allen wrench through the bottom hole holding it in place, and now I'll use my longer Allen wrench, which will let me reach and get the top screw in place. And once you have the screws in, you need to rotate the end plate and get it square, and then tighten them. You may need to adjust that later on to get the door square. And now we have both end plates mounted, secured. We have them to where we think they're positioned right. We may have to make an adjustment later. We're going to reconnect all the wires. So we go in and we have all our wires labeled, and we put them all back together. The two green wires that I cut, I'm just going to put back together with wire nuts. And then I have all my other wires. This one is the only one that is not color to color, and it's black to yellow. The others will all match color for color. And now we're ready to turn the power back on and test the unit. So I've got the wires all tucked back up inside. Sometimes what will happen is when you're handling this end plate, this door closed micro may bend a little bit, and if it does, then the door, when it closes, will keep running. So you may, or it doesn't close all the way. You may have to adjust that. And the way you adjust that is you just bend the arm until it's where you want it to be. And that's your fine adjustment on the micros. So we've got everything, all the wires back in place. The door's all up in place and happy. We've got our access panels put back on. No interference with the door closed micro. And Everything looks good.